Hello, great to see you. Thank you for your interest. A different digital world is possible and it's necessary. The digital world is fascinating. That's why we're all here. If you look closely, you notice it's a bit boring. It's completely commercialized, and it doesn't matter what you're looking for, you will always find the same names. Amazon, Alphabet, Meta, Microsoft, they dominate the market of search engines, of operating system, of marketplaces, and so on. This concentration of digital power means different things. The money is concentrated in just a few places, so is the data, but also the power of regulation is quite concentrated. Against this status quo and this establishment, there seems to be no possible alternative. But and how we can break this power is something that few people believe. But there is such a thing as hope, the digital counterworld. For almost every big tech product, there is an alternative. Free software, free platforms, free operating systems, and so on. There is a plethora of projects. This is just a small part of it. These projects are usually treating data much more respectfully. They're often transparent, participatory. They're not always non-commercial, but they're always under free licenses, meaning the content can be used for all sorts of different purposes by anyone. I'm a journalist, and at some point I looked left and right which free alternatives existed. And then I sat down and tried to bring together this diversity, and I wrote a book about it. And I want to share my insight in the next 30 minutes with you. In the beginning, it's about two questions. How is this world organized beyond the classical big players, and how is that work financed? And I will pick out 10 projects and check out what they look like, and want to draw a status quo of how this counterworld is working and move on from there. How is it organized? There is an anatomy of this counterworld. The most important factor is the communities that come together and work together on this big project as volunteers. They might be tiny, they might be mass movements, which have regional groups in many cities. Those communities are organized through typical principles of self-organization. There's often the principle of meritocracy, who contributes a lot, decides a lot. You can do what you like, self-chosen groups. Sometimes there is power in those groups, which is usually elected. And in some groups, there are councils which are closed that elect themselves and control themselves. The second type are organizations. They are often non-profit organizations. They are often serving the communities, and the organizations are often closed in their leadership. Sometimes they're more participatory. Those are the two main pillars of the digital counterworld. Sometimes there are more pillars which look a bit alien at first look, because they don't seem to fit with this idea of non-commercial work that you normally associate with these types of projects. There are also companies in the digital counterworld, and those companies do something which sounds senseless. They produce for the common good under free licenses and a lack of ownership. And at some point, there is also prominent individuals, I call them gurus. Linus Torvalds of Linux would be one example, or the founder of Mastodon. They're usually founders. Their vote has a lot of weight in discussions, and quite often they also have positions of power in their organizations or companies. How is that work financed? A lot of it works through volunteers, but it doesn't work completely without money. Websites needs to be run, servers need to be run, and especially for projects with the security aspect, it's not good to run everything on the weekend through volunteers and after work. So how does money come in? There are some typical business models, quote unquote, in the digital counterworld, and I want to introduce those with the most typical examples. The most obvious idea is, of course, donations, like Wikipedia. Wikipedia runs a campaign for donations at the end of each year, and the Wikimedia Foundation raised around $117 million through those donations to the organization behind Wikipedia, and the regional organization in Germany had 9 million euro and 5.5 million euros just through membership fees, and thus donations finance them. If not the users finance the project, then it needs a third party. And that always carries the danger that this third party takes influence and that the project sells its soul. Very often you find the state itself, who's active through subsidies, and the prototype for that is the project of Tor, which is against censorship. The organization behind it is financed from the beginning by around 60% through subsidies by the state. For a long time, it was a bit weird that most free hacker projects went to the US government because there was a subsidy called Open Tech Fund, which was quite easily accessible, and you could get money up to $200,000 per project. In the meantime, Europe caught up to that, and there is a subsidy called NGI 0, and the prototype fund in Germany distributes money for those free projects. A different model would be deals. Projects have commercial partnerships. Firefox is most known for that. The organization behind Firefox, Mozilla, has a deal with Google, and in the last few years, 450 million have been spent just for the fact that Google is the standard search engine in Firefox. What does that look like? In the yearly balance sheet, the yearly report, it's not quite clear, but you can puzzle it together. The search deals, and at another place there are some obligatory hints for risks, and there it said 2022, 80% of the income of partners comes from one single entity, which has to be Google. And if you add up those numbers, 2022, Mozilla probably received $430 million from Alphabet. That's what it could look like. A different model is people that came into money finance a project. Those are donors, patrons. They probably want to soothe their own conscience. They came into money in the tech industry, and one of those examples is Signal. Brian Acton is a tech billionaire. He has sold his shares of like $3 billion of Facebook and gave that money to Signal. This information is also coded in the yearly report. But he apparently gave a loan without interest of $105 million to Signal, and then the number is $75 $100,000 less, and that is the capital of the foundation now. Then there are open source business models. They're also quite important. They allow the economical paradox that companies can support free projects and finance them, despite the fact that they don't have exclusive ownership of those, and get financed by other ways, support consulting, cloud services, and so on. You find this dominantly with Linux. These are the three most important Linux distributions out of this Linux family. There are companies behind them. Canonical, Red Hat, which is a daughter of IBM, and the company out of Nuremberg, SUSE, who produced this free operating system together with the community. And based on these free systems, they built a version and financed themselves through that quite well. These are the two building blocks to explain what holds the counterworld together: organization and financing. Now, I want to walk you through those points for 10 important projects. I will start with Wikipedia. The big encyclopedia has a community behind it writing the content. For the technical basics, there is an organization called the Wikimedia Foundation, which has roughly 700 employees in different regional chapters, for instance, Wikimedia Germany. There is also a guru, a prominent individual, the founder, Jimmy Wales, who is as a executive in a prominent position. Wikimedia is financed through donations. A similar project is OpenStreetMap, which has a similar structure. There is an organization, the British Street Map Foundation. There's also Foskis in Germany. They also work within the community, and then they create something beautiful, such as this. This is looking at where we are right now. Free programs. Firefox is financed through this deal with Alphabet, and the parent organization behind that, Mozilla, produces Firefox in-house mainly and is financed through this deal. It's not known what the current state of affairs is. We know that the last contract ended in 2023, and Mozilla is quite intransparent about how it will continue. Maybe Mozilla would have published this at the Publica, but they didn't. Somebody might be interested to take over this deal. Another important program is LibreOffice. Behind that, there is a foundation, the Document Foundation, out of Berlin. They have a quite interesting model of power. It's a pure meritocracy. There is a board of roughly 200 people, and everybody can become a member who spend time and creative work in the last few years, as they say in their documents. And to say a bit more about that, the story of LibreOffice, it started as a fork of a commercial project at the time. And nowadays, LibreOffice is mainly developed by companies. LibreOffice publishes diagrams. Who finances them? And you can see the Document Foundation is rather marginal. The volunteers as well, but most of the code is written by companies because they have a vested interest in LibreOffice being great because they make it part of their own projects. Free platforms. The power of platforms to be a player in social media, that is a known issue. And there's one player who made it quite well, and that would be Signal, the big smartphone messenger. Just like Firefox, it's mainly done in-house of one US organization, which is called the Signal Foundation. It is mainly financed by that one patron mentioned, and it has one source of income. It's not quite clear what that is. That could be individual donations, but it could of individuals, organizations. And the model of power that Signal has is quite fascinating. It's kind of the opposite of the participatory model of LibreOffice. If you look on the website, you can see there is a board, an executive board, and you could think that they hold the power, but that's not the case. There is an individual that seems to be a guru, and that would be that second person up here, Brian Acton. We already saw him. He's one of the WhatsApp founders who is the main patron of Signal. He is in the board of directors. He's also running the day-to-day business, and he is the CEO of the day-to-day work as well. And that is something that's not quite widely known. It is transparent on the technological side, but it's quite intransparent about its internal structures. Signal gives yearly reports. LibreOffice gives yearly reports. Signal does not do that. You can find certain reports in other places, like this one, which has been filed in the Tax Bureau of the United States. But on top of this board of directors, there is another source of power, and that is a membership council of one person. Again, Brian Acton. He is the only one who can change the board of directors or fire them. I asked questions whether I read this correctly. They have confirmed certain things and not answered others, but I think that is quite unanimous.
Another big platform project is Mastodon. It's a short message service. It's a bit like Twitter and X, but it's an alternative. It's style of the Fediverse, of a network of distributed platforms. And Mastodon itself is a network that contains of a lot of instances that have used the software, and you think about which instance you use, where you can get an account, and this is like a big communication room. Behind Mastodon, there's one single person, Eugen Rochko. He studied in Jena and Thuringia, and after his studies, he made this software, and he's developing Mastodon with a company, and they tried. They founded a common company, and but it got problems with the tax office, by the way. This is the guy who leads it, and behind that is an infrastructure community that uses the software. The biggest one in the German area is Mastodon.social. This is led by Eugen Rochko's company, by the way. So free operating systems. This is like Linux, the Linux family. There's over 100 of variants of OSs there. Behind that, there's a wild mixture of elements of the digital world. All Linux systems have the Linux kernel as a core. This is developed by the Linux Foundation. And there's one guru who's paid pretty well in the foundation, and he's got the power of the Linux cosmos. There's a community, but the kernel is written by big tech companies. In my opinion, the most important version of Linux is Debian. There's just a community behind it, and there's also different systems with an open source background where companies work together with a community that was kind of pseudo-democratic, and there's also some kind of guru, the Ubuntu and Canonical founder. And Mint is also a very important system. It's a non-commercial version of Linux, and there's a community behind it, and it's mainly done by the founder of Mint. And Android is also a Linux system and also a piece of Linux that is only for smartphones, but it's also a pillar of power for Linux. Android is free software because it's Linux, and Google made Android in a way that they actually have the say. How did Google do this? Android is made up by two parts. It's the Android open source project and also the Google Android system, where Google makes the services for to make sure the smartphone works properly. The one addition is Google Play, the marketplace. The other systems are the Google Play services that many apps use to be able to run. Otherwise, they would produce errors. And from the first hour on, they tried to take the open source project out of Android and to free Android. How does this work if the Play marketplace isn't there? They need other options to install apps. For example, there's one really small app marketplace that only covers free and open source software, and you usually use this with the Aurora store, where an Indian developer is in charge, and it's basically loading the stuff from Play Store, and you actually get the apps from Google, but you don't need the Play Store, this non-open system, and you don't need a Google account as well. The other hack is to remove the helpers. There's an IT guy from Saarbrücken, and he looked at all the systems and how they communicate, and he rebuilt them with micro-G. Most apps can be used on Android without the Play services and without them complaining and producing errors. And there's this third hack where you install the non-free Google services, but they're containered, so they barely have access to the whole device. There's a lot of alternative versions of Android that are really important, and they all work with the hacks. Sometimes they are non-commercial, and sometimes there's open source business models behind it. These are the most important categories, and I want to name two more projects who do really important things because they make sure you have free access to the internet. One thing is Tor, the big anonymization and anti-censorship service. It's also behind Darknet, basically. You can just fake yourself into the internet because websites are distributed using different servers. And the Tor nodes are spread all around the world, and it's powered by the global hacker community, especially from Germany. 30% of all Tor traffic is directed over German nodes. There's, for example, these who are paying for this, like the Digitale Gesellschaft, Digital Courage, F3, some companies that do that. And it's based on the Tor project from the US. And it looks like one simple standard constellation, but there's a third actor behind it. It's kind of surprising. The US state, they are financing the Tor project in about 60%. I try to find the numbers and to try to find out what kind of budget they have. Most monies come from the U.S. External Office and also from there's like so many money givers in the system. But how does this relate? I mean, the Tor project was made at the U.S. Marine, and they had the target to be able to use the internet in a secret service, but they found out it's only usable if they have other traffic on the system. So Tor took it over, and since then it's basically financed by the US state. because there's a strategic use of the system, but anti-censorship is really important in this system. Google and Facebook are market leaders, but not in places where they are censored. For example, if you have like China or Russia, and they can use systems like Facebook or Google, and there's interesting data you can get out of these countries with the Tor system. There's another system, Freifunk. It's an open Wi-Fi system for everyone. You can share your internet connection with others by adding additional software to your router, and it's a big project in the German-speaking area. We have it in other countries with different names. There's around 400 communities in Germany, and they build up their own clubs, and there's not like a big organization behind it. I talked to Elektra Wagenrad, and he discussed it. We don't need a central committee for Freifunk. Free content, free apps, free platforms, free OSs, and this is what the digital presence works like. It's over 100 projects. So what is it all about right now? We use Google. We use Signal, the media player VLC, and if we want to be honest, most of these are kind of niche, but. This is a question of resources. It's a David against Goliath. The big tech has unlimited resources, big computing centers, and they can work on the usability to make their products work, no matter if you know IT or if you don't. And that's usually what's missing in open projects. But there's not only one David fighting with a big Goliath. What can we do? We can fund the systems. States can do that. Maybe also funding from companies. It would actually help if companies on a state organization use these projects that would get more people into contact with the projects, but they would also like start working with them and using features they don't have. We can use them. We can make them more public in our surroundings, and you can also donate, and you can be active in systems, especially when it comes to content projects. In software projects, it's a little more difficult, but even in these processes, people are there that don't have a technical background, because it's always lacking in this regard. You can also download a handout where I tell you more about these projects I quoted, and you can also find the numbers and the descriptions to the projects, and also more free projects. I started this project with a different digital world as possible, and I want to add something to it. It's not only possible, but it's already there. So if you feel like it's good and perfect, and make it bigger. Thank you.